Okay, it's been about a month since I last uploaded a video about Gundam Evolution, and now we're on to a new season. So I'm gonna share some thoughts about it and about the game itself. So first of all, I didn't actually play for most of Season 2. I played a lot at the beginning, only ranked, only competitive, but I quit because of all the disconnect issues. I was getting them quite frequently, and so are other people. I reinstalled partway through the season, and I actually stopped disconnecting. I don't think I had a single disconnect in the latter half of the season, but other people in my game still were having the problem. I took another break and reinstalled for the end of the season, played a few games, and they were all fine. Throughout this time, I also kept up with the game's tournaments, including Bandai's second Showdown and the two Gundam Evolution New Type League tournaments. We'll talk about them a little later. Let's get into the release notes for the new season. So we get a new unit. It's called Hyperion Gundam. It looks cool, but it's basically an off-tank type of unit. It has a shield. It has two shields, in fact. One shield is like Sazabi's, and the other shield is kind of like the new Gundam G-Maneuver, in that it protects a wide area 360 degrees. In my opinion, from what I've seen, Hyperion will not change the meta at all in competitive play. The meta is pretty firmly set, and I might make a video explaining the meta and why it is what it is if you've watched semifinals and above of tournaments. But you'll definitely see it in solo queue, and I'll definitely be playing it. Next up, we have some balance adjustments and regular rotation of cosmetics and such. Some events where you can get material points. This is the green currency that you use to unlock skins or profile pictures or icons of your choice. So you can get it up to 600, and that should be good enough to unlock some of the cooler skins, like the Doom Order series, or maybe some of the animated profile or portraits. So that's cool. Of course, we still need capital for the free-to-play players. So we have some cosmetics. I think they've been getting better over time, but they're still not amazing. Of course, there's a unit pack. Gotta make money. Looks okay. At least it's more complex than the basic recolors that most people use. I won't be buying it. New pods. Items. Pretty normal stuff. Aim assist for consoles. Yeah, Gundam Evolution is now available on consoles and people are playing it there. Doesn't seem like ranked has taken off much on consoles though, such as casual play. In case anyone was wondering, yeah, the game's still dying. If you look at a month back, we go from peaks of over 1,000, and most of the time the game is around 500 or so players. Maintenance is going on right now, so the number is artificially low, but the game's basically below 1,000 peak most of the time. Again, it doesn't include Japanese players, and the Japanese server is still quite active. Let's get into the balance adjustments. So Zakutu range is getting a small buff. When you use the smoke, you get some of your boost back, and this will let you dash around more. And Bandai is sticking with this usage rate and win rate mentality for buffing and nerfing units, which is quite bad in my opinion. It doesn't even specify at what ELO rating these win rates are low at. In any case, I don't think it's much of an issue here. It'll help the Smurfs level up faster, but Zakutu range is not used very often in competitive play. Next up we have Ashmar. It's getting buffed, surprisingly, so its right-click shot is getting a lower cooldown. It's quite hard to hit, so it's not a massive deal, but the napalm is the big villain here. You're getting more damage. You'll be charging up your punch a lot faster because of this. Ashmar is quite a strong unit. It is used in competitive play quite regularly, and I don't think it needs a buff. I think it needs a small nerf. Turn A Gundam, its Judo throw is getting nerfed in terms of damage. Not such a big deal. The stun is the big benefit of it, not so much the damage. You'll typically be playing with your team, hopefully, so they'll be contributing to the damage. You just want to get someone off of you. And maybe turn A players will have to pay more attention to headshotting stunned enemies instead of spamming body shots. Overall, kind of a weird nerf. Probably want to target the G maneuver instead. Jim is getting a small buff. You get more hit points, and that's a change that I felt was necessary. And a bit more knockback on the shield. That's okay. Certainly not enough to propel it into prominent use, let's say. Marsa is getting changed quite a bit. So its hook is getting significantly reduced cooldown, so you can spam it out a lot more. In exchange, the damage is almost nothing. They could have at least made it 50 or something, a little higher than 10. You still get the main benefit of the stun and the combo with your beam blade, which has also been changed. So less damage but more knockback, slightly better stun. The hook is one of the weird mechanics in this game where units can sometimes get caught on walls, and it's quite inconsistent if they get pulled to you or not. Of course, because most people are playing on Japan with high ping in the West, this is kind of hard to hit, certainly not impossible. We'll see how the change pans out, but hey, you get to have more fun with your hook. I think this is the main attraction of Marasai, and people will have more fun with it. And then its G maneuver will come up slightly faster, so that's a buff. And it is quite a good G maneuver. Next up, Mahiru. So Mahiru has been a constant target of buffs and nerfs, just because it's such a polarizing unit. Most of the time, it's very bad, but on some specific areas of maps, it is very strong. Now, it's not strong enough for competitive play, from what we've seen in tournaments. In solo queue, where people are disorganized, they're not going in on Harbor City elbow at the same time, or flying over with multiple units, Mahiru can be quite oppressive, and so it is getting nerfed. It has gotten nerfed, and now it's getting a small buff. Overall, not much will change here. Zaku Melee, another constant target of changes. You can argue if this is a nerf or a buff, but I consider it a nerf. Now you need to take more damage to activate your rage. It'll make it harder, but you're rewarded more when you do get it, lasting longer, and you get more damage, of course, on your regular moves. Keep in mind, Zaku 2 Melee is relatively hated in the casual community at least, for how annoying it can be, alongside other melee units, of course. New Gundam finally. It's a very small change here, but you don't get reduced movement speed anymore pretty much when you're right-clicking. Bandai is acknowledging New Gundam's size does make it a pretty easy target, so that's why they want movement speed. Keep in mind, New Gundam has a massive hitbox. Not quite as large as Sazabi, but it's really up there. It's the second largest, and you only get one dash. So you are a very easy target. And I think this is something that's holding New Gundam back from seeing more play. I would also argue its beam rifle is too weak. It doesn't do enough damage, and has very massive damage fall off. Next up, we have some changes to overtime rules and point capture and bomb plant destruction. And this is worded very, very strangely. I had to reread this a couple of times to understand what was actually being said. But the gist of it is, if the enemy team speedran you and won very quickly, while your team barely won in overtime, then when the sides switch for overtime, the team that barely won in overtime loses the game if the other team takes 25% of the first objective. Whereas before, both teams would have an equal chance. They could go as far as they could within the overtime, and then whoever got farther would win the game, or the game would be a draw if both teams took both points. But now this time, if one team had a much better run in regulation, they have an easier time of securing the game. However, the second part of this rule is that if the score is tied at overtime, instead of the game drawing, there will be additional rounds of overtime until it gets to the 10-10 or something. And this game does produce a lot of close moments. So, on one hand, Bandai has made changes to reduce the length of games by reducing the time in rounds in normal time, as well as adding this overtime rule. On the other hand, there is the possibility of games lasting for obscene amounts of time if both teams are wrecking each other. Next up, we have matchmaking area integration. This one's important. Currently, we have 4 servers: Japan, Asia, North America, and Europe. Now they're being merged into 2, one for Asia and one for basically the West, North America and Europe. And the reason is obvious. Outside of Japan, Gundam Evolution has a very small player base. People in NA and EU take many minutes or maybe hours to find ranked games, and when they do, there's massive disparities in the matchmaking. So servers are being merged. Doesn't matter much for the Asia server because everyone plays on Japan, including players from Southeast Asia. They'll probably continue playing on Japan. They get good enough ping. But what about North America and Europe? I think these players, at least the higher level players, will continue playing on Japan. But now hopefully casual players will be able to find ranked games if they want to. And yes, ping will be a problem, but it won't be as bad as Japan. Not nearly. So it's a good change in my opinion. It's sad it had to happen because it basically means there's not enough players. But given the situation, it makes sense. Small change for master players. Basically, people who get master or new type sometimes have to wait a very long time to find games because their rating is so high, despite their rank being master and new type, which can theoretically scale up infinitely in terms of rating, sorry. But rating is taken into consideration in the matchmaking system. So that's balance. Overall, changes are okay. It's hard to be very positive. Again, Bandai is quite weird about balance changes. Some of the changes go in the right direction, but not on the right abilities, or not adjusting the right parameters, in my opinion. And this goes back to when they indirectly nerfed melee units by giving ranged units more ammo in their clip. Anyways, let's move on to the dev blog. So now the developers have some messages to the community. So stability and matchmaking. Honestly, I feel like big improvements have been made already in Season 2. I was disconnecting a lot in Season 2 early on, but at least I had a much better experience towards the end of the season. I only disconnected once at the end of a game, so it didn't impact anything. And hopefully merging the regions will help, assuming players stick to their own region, roughly. Okay, unlocking units. So people have been complaining about this since the beginning. Free-to-play players basically have no way to unlock all the units. They need capital. Capital is also used to purchase the supply pods, the loot crates basically. And of course they give a non-answer. They might do some more events where if you log in you get some capital. And that's okay, but I think capital should be a reward from actually playing the game. More frequent balance patches. I don't know how many people are calling for this. In my opinion, just do better balance patches. And basically saying that they need more data before they make changes. As we all know, they go off of win rate and usage rate. Usage titles. Nobody cares. Teammate damage numbers and stats, in my opinion, that would be very good to have. Yeah, people will sometimes get flamed if they do poorly, but it comes part of the game in a competitive setting. And it is cool to see out of curiosity. And this is somehow available in the game because tournaments are able to pull up these numbers. The tournament system has been greatly improved in Gundam Evolution, and so spectators can see how many kills and deaths each player has. Next up, we have mid-match challenge progress. So real-time progress during a match. Okay, decent feature. I don't know how many people play the game for challenges, but maybe when you hold the tab, you can see your progress. Unit hitboxes and damage. So obviously in Gundam lore, the mobile suits that we play as are widely different in terms of size. And so the statement here is that the hitboxes are being determined based on the size of the original series. So they are trying to be accurate, and they're balancing this out by giving more HP. And that's fine, but I think that Gundam Evolution is not a lore accurate game. It's not about the Gundam story or the anime or the characters. It's a competitive game. And the lore shouldn't come at the expense of balance. New customization options, adding pilot voices. This is a very popular request from the community. And I'm guessing they'll make this paid content, but surely there will be people willing to pay for it, so it's fine. FPS improvements, this is a big one. Currently the game's limited to 120 FPS, but don't worry about it because you probably won't have 120 FPS constantly because the game's so poorly optimized, even on high-end hardware. It's not just me, I swear. Pretty much any shooter game, any modern shooter game with an esports mindset has unlimited FPS and is pretty well optimized, over 200 or 300 FPS to match high-end gaming monitors. Gundam Evolution is obviously behind on this, so hope they make improvements. Online tournament regions. They're planning on expanding tournaments to North, Central, and South America. Well, they gotta get to Europe at some point. Let's talk about this one a little more. Bandai's showdown was only US players, and I think this hurt turnout. It definitely broke up existing teams, forcing them to find new players, new rosters, and overall it looks very bad on the game. The tournament was held, and honestly, it was very well done. And the final series was epic. The casters did a great job. I don't know how much they actually care about Gundam Evolution, but they were past Overwatch casters, so they had experience with the genre, and I think they brought their A game. And the series itself, if anyone watched, went the full distance, a full 10 maps, which took a very long time, but it was well worth it. And it makes you think, how much better could the tournament have been if players from all over the world could have participated? Including Japan, by the way. I'm totally fine personally if Japanese players play in Western tournaments. Bandai then basically cannibalized the community tournament circuit by creating this point system where the teams with the most points in community tournaments would have a spot in the next showdown, number 3. Now this came with the caveat that now community tournaments were US only. So that was awful, because before European players and Canadians could play, as well as anyone else who wanted to. Recently, Bandai opened up tournaments to Canadians as well, so that's an improvement, but it really feels like they're moving much too slowly and alienating, again, most of the world. And by the way, Gundam Evolution is still not available in many countries of the world, including many parts of South America, including Brazil. That's a big miss, and I really hope Bandai opens up the game. Finally, info for players outside of Japan. They recognize some areas can be improved, sure. Support more languages beyond just English. Okay, would be nice. So that's it. Overall, I think Gundam Evolution is on a good path. A piece of news that wasn't mentioned here, I don't think exactly, or maybe I missed it, was that we're not just getting one new unit. We're getting one immediately, but then one new unit in March and one new unit in April. So basically, Season 3 will have 3 new units in total. They're just staggered on release. We don't know what those units will be, but it's a good move, and it shows that Bandai is still serious about developing the game. And when you see numbers like this, as a developer, you're probably thinking, maybe it's time to pack up. But Bandai is seemingly increasing development on the game. And I hope it pays off. I hope more players play Gundam Evolution. I still think it's a good game. Of course, I won't deny any of the issues. Of course, there are so many. But maybe we can have something special. A small but active community. And we'll see. So thanks for watching the video, and see you guys in Season 3.